Hello and welcome to X Witness a Week. I am your host, Jonathan. I hope that you are doing well today. It is Friday. The Black Friday sales have begun. So I hope that if you ventured forth into the stores that you came out okay and were not injured and got what you'd like. Surprise introduction. What are we going to talk about today? I thought about it long and hard. What do I want to talk about? And it dawned on me that, what are Jehovah's Witnesses best known for? For the preaching work. Why are they doing the preaching work? Because it's the end times and they need to get that word out there to try and save people from the coming destruction. So how do they know it's the end times? Because of the composite sign of the end. Stephen Lent likes to remind us about the last days of the last days.
So the events unfolding around us are making clearer than ever that we're living in the final part of the last days, undoubtedly the final part of the final part of the last days, shortly before the last day of the last days.
And there was recently a talk by one of the governing body members about the composite sign of the last days.
Jesus then went on to list many events that would occur during the last days. He mentioned wars. He mentioned earthquakes. He mentioned famines and all sorts of pestilences. Truly, we have seen those things happen in recent times. In addition to all of that, Matthew 24, verse 14, mentioned the need to preach the good news of the kingdom. But there could be some who perhaps may doubt a little and say, well, there's been wars all through time. There's been earthquakes at other times, not just in the last days, and food shortages. So why can we be so sure that this is the time when we know that Jesus will soon bring about an end to wickedness?
So I thought to myself, I will talk about some of these composite parts of the last days and see if they really are factual, if they are really something that is based on science and history, and let's see what we can find out. So let's start with a big one, wars. Currently, there is a war going on in Ukraine. If you're living under a rock, might not know about this, but yes, there is a war that's been going on approximately 10 months now, started by Russian President Vladimir Putin. When this began, there was a lot of talk about the King of the North, about this composite sign and how there'd be wars in more places. So war is really on the mind of a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses and people in general. Is this the most deadly, violent time in human history? It's definitely deadly. There were a lot of terrible conflicts. A lot of people have died. If you think about World War I, approximately 24 million people were killed during that conflict. World War II, approximately 71 million people were killed during that conflict. That's pretty huge. But something to consider when you're talking about war and its effect on the world is the current world population. Now, if you look at the history of the world and the population, for a long time, it's just sort of a horizontal line. There's a slight uptick over the years, but it's not doing much. I believe in 1 AD, the world population is something like 170 million. Not a ton. I mean, it's still a lot of people, but once you get into modern times, it just kind of goes up like a steep roller coaster. And now we're at something like, close to we're around 8 billion. I forget the exact number. It's right here. I love editing because I can just put things in that I don't remember off the top of my head. So when it comes to war, you think about the 24 million people that were killed during World War I. Well, what was the population at the time? It's estimated to be about 1.6 billion people. If you do the math, you come to find out that it's about 1.5% of the Earth's population were killed during this conflict. That's pretty huge. Then you go to World War II, and you see that there was approximately 2.7 billion people on the planet at the time, and that leads to about a death rate of 2.63% of the world's population that was killed. So per capita, 2.63, we'll say. How does it compare with other points in history? So to give some examples of what happened in the past, not in the 20th century, I'm going to give you 3 examples from history of conflicts and the amount of death that resulted from them. The first one I'm going to talk about is the Mongolian conquest of Eurasia. This happened from 1206 to 1368. During that period, the average was about 380 million people living on the planet. So, how many people were killed? About 35 million people. So if you do the math, that gives you a figure of 9.21% of the Earth's population that was killed during this conflict. That's a lot bigger than what happened in World War II. The second example is that of the An Lushan Rebellion, which was between China and Vietnam. During this period, 22 million people were killed. This was from 755 to 765 AD. What was the Earth's population at the time? About 198 million. So that gave you a death rate of 11% of the Earth's population were killed at that time. Even worse. Now, mind you, more people were killed in World War II, but the percentage of people in the world, it was greater during this time. The third example that I'm going to give is that of the Three Kingdoms War, which took place from 184 to 280 in China. What was the Earth's population at the time? About 180 million. How many people were killed? 38 million. So that means, doing the math, that they estimate 21.1% of people in the world at the time were killed during this period. That's a lot. That's a lot to take in. So to say that the 20th century was the most violent and the most wars and the most people killed is partially correct. But it's not honest if you don't factor in the amount of people at the time. So I hope that you found that interesting. I tried saying this a couple times, but it's important to really think about these things when you're being told by religious leaders that this is the way things are. It's important to put a little extra work into it and to really think about it and to consider all the factors to whether what they're saying to you is 100% true. So I think that the next video that I'll put out will have to do with pestilence, and you all know why, based on what's been happening in the last couple of years throughout the world. So let's talk about that one next time around. So I want to thank you for watching. I hope that you'll hang out with me next time. Please like, share, and subscribe. I'm happy to say that we've made it to 1,000 subscribers recently, and I'd like to continue that trend to grow and be able to talk to more people on the other end of the phones. So I will catch you next time. Bye for now. With Mongolia. Everyone's heard of Genghis Khan and the conquest that happened during that time. That was from the year 1095 to 1291 AD. That this... Oh, no, that's not. That was the Crusades. The second example is the Andalusian Rebellion, which took place between Canada